We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warm-up for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Heaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. We're going to have a nice two-part chat with our good friend Rob Donaldson. Not a lot happened in college basketball on Sunday, and hopefully you all enjoyed a very happy Father's Day, by the way. But with that, we are going to be chatting with Rob about a little bit of everything. So these teams in the mid-major ranks that he's feeling a little bit bullish on. We're going to talk about some of the schools where it feels like the game is perhaps passing by a little bit. We're going to be addressing the fact that Kansas has had a less than savory offseason. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of these teams in the Big Ten that are utilizing the transfer portal well, a few teams that are being left behind as well, and we're just going to be going a little bit all over the place with Rob, getting some of his initial thoughts now that these rosters are getting relatively set. So we're going to be chatting with Rob for two parts on this podcast today, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by Edge Boost. Over at Edge Boost, they're making sure that bettors are able to access their funds whenever they want, 24/7, 365. When you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, GREG. That'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat with our good friend Rob, who he does great work with his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, the Rob's Best Bet Show. Additionally, you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB. And Rob, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And, a lot of things are still happening in college basketball, even though it's, I guess a few months, quote unquote, a few months away from actually getting the season started off. But hey, this is where teams are built. And I'm excited to hop on with you today.
Absolutely, and now we're sort of in that crossroads of the offseason in that we're past the NBA draft decisions. We know a lot of where these transfers are going to go. We still have a few stray moves out there, and it's mostly like the low/mid majors that are picking up that last guy or dude to be able to round things out. You've got those last few guys that maybe they didn't get the offer that they wanted. Now they're probably not going to get the offer that they want, but they have to settle for something. But how do you take a look at this time in the offseason where we're starting to learn more and more about these teams? We have these rosters coming into form, but now it's all about fine-tuning and deciding, all right, how are we going to evaluate these teams coming into the season?
Yeah, there's definitely what we've learned from NIL kind of being adapted into the sport is there's a very clear hierarchy in terms of who gets to pick first, and then who are the residual teams that get to pick second, third, fourth, fifth, and all the way down the line. And yeah, I think the biggest time right now of what we can kind of take away, especially now that the NBA draft is sort of out of the purview. There's no more gray area. We know what rosters are going to kind of look like more so than not at this point. Obviously, still waiting on a case ruling in court of whether or not some of these guys can have an extra year of eligibility, which would throw a whole wrench into everything that we kind of know about these teams right now. But I think what we understand is kind of the identities that these coaches are wanting to go for and what these programs are wanting to go for. And I think there's a lot of cause for optimism for some of these teams that maybe haven't really necessarily been relevant over the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, but I think that is going to be so interesting to take a look at. And I feel like these coaching hires are going to help out some of these teams that have been irrelevant for a long time, being able to rise up and being able to step up. And are there just a few in particular that you take a look at and you feel like they might finally be able to change your fortunes? And maybe there's a few teams that they got it wrong with their last few coaching hires that this time around you feel like they finally got it right.
Well, I think one of the more obvious ones is looking at Michigan and Dusty May and just kind of seeing what they were able to do in year one and just the immediate success, the immediate return on investment to make the Sweet 16 and heck, even push for an Elite Eight against a really great Auburn squad. They were right there in the second half of that ball game with a roster that was pretty much entirely comprised of just transfer portal additions and not even just the Florida Atlantic guys. There was only one Florida Atlantic guy that went with Dusty May up to Michigan, and that's a program that I think is a perfect example of how this model is really going to benefit, some of these top tier programs with a big brand value and adding in a very exuberant, energetic head coach who's willing to actually use the portal as sort of a style to acquire talent rather than just relying on guys staying loyal to the program, which loyalty is kind of dead in college sports. I don't know if that's even a term you can throw around anymore. Loyalty is, hey, can we keep this guy for a 2-year stretch, 2-year window? And that's kind of where this game operates now. And I think Michigan, I think UCLA, I think even a school like a USC could really emerge because of that sort of, system. And I'm very excited to see how that plays out here.
Yep, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Loyalty is the amount of Benjamins that you do have in your pocket and or in your suitcase when you are going to meet with these players. As shown to me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I'm so glad that you were pointing out Michigan because I feel like perhaps the best offseason has been had by the Big Ten because I look at all these coaching hires, Ben McCollum going on over to Iowa, Indiana being able to bring in DeVries squared in this case with Tucker and Darren DeVries going on over there, Nico Medved going to Minnesota, and I think that this is just a big game changer for a Big Ten that I'm so glad that you mentioned it because these schools have felt like they were very slow to adapt to NIL, the transfer portal, what have you, and it feels like, for lack of a better term, the entire conference is getting with the program.
There used to be a linear path to building a respectable program and acquiring the top 10 talent, or the top end talent rather. It used to be, hey, win games, put guys in the league, and you're going to attract your fair share of players to compete at a high level. And now, it doesn't matter how many games you win. It doesn't matter how many players you put in the league because players are trying to make their careers within college basketball. And, we even saw that this offseason with guys jumping ship from Texas Tech, Michigan State, Auburn, and Florida. I mean, Florida just won the championship. It doesn't get, a higher stage than that. It just kind of shows what really this game is all about. It's not about the 3-year, 4-year, 5-year loyalty guys. It's about, hey, how many players can we kind of acquire over a 2-year stretch, make them gel together and make it work? And I think a lot of coaches are getting with the program. I think a guy like a Tom Izzo could end up being phased out, Bill Self included. These are sort of the guys that want to have that sort of ethical program building of, hey, we just want to acquire guys and win games and I just want to coach. And that used to be great. That can still potentially play out and have a high floor. But I think that the days of those types of coaches really kind of reigning, the entire reign of college basketball is kind of on the back end at this point.
Oh, and I am so glad that you mentioned Bill Self as well, because I just have so much question mark as to how things have gone this offseason for Kansas, because I'm just very underwhelmed by what they brought in. Sure, Melvin Council is a nice player, but when you're relying upon him, Floyd Bungu, hopefully I said that name correctly. I always get his name correct, but I do know that they bring in the guy with the interesting name that was pretty rock solid last season. They get him back, so that's going to be able to help them out a little bit. But I just take a look at this entire Kansas team, and it feels like a team that should be bringing in a lot more talent, a lot more name brand with regards to the transfer portal, albeit they brought in a few solid freshmen. But in this day and age, bringing in freshmen, if you're a team like Kansas, probably not going to be able to cut it. And I have some serious question marks as to how they're going to play on the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, it almost kind of feels like we're seeing the twilight of a guy like a Bill Self's career. And, we even saw it, with a Tony Bennett who retired, quote unquote, a little bit earlier in his prime. Mike Bray stepped away from the college game to just be an assistant on an NBA team. Thad Matta, I'm sure, is on the twilight end of his career as well. And I think a large part of it comes down to, that they came up with, and Bill Self coached Perry Ellis. He had guys who were with the program for 17 17 years, never thought about transferring. They weren't competing, within their own roster to retain guys. They were just adding. They're just like, all right, you're a great freshman, come over to Kansas. And then when their time was gone, whether that was, they're heading off to the NBA or they're graduating from college in general, Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, these programs never really had to face that adversity. And now every single offseason, you don't have, again, those brand loyal guys or those university loyal guys. And I think somebody like a Bill Self might just be on the back end of, hey, I'm going to coach with what I got and go out on an ethical right way and not stress about it. I mean, this guy also had some heart problems in recent years too. I don't think he's one of the more energetic coaches, if I had to say, in the game right now.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you mentioned the fact that he was coaching up Perry Ellis, who I think that he just petitioned the NCAA for another year of experience as well. I think that unfortunately got turned down, much like Zakai Ziegler's as well. As joining me on the show, it is our good friend Rob Donaldson over at the Rob's Best Bet Show, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we have been seeing more of those court rulings over the last few days, and it is warming my soul that some of these guys that played like 5-6 years of college basketball are not having them come through. Like, I love Zakai Ziegler. Zakai Ziegler was great over at Tennessee. We did not need another year of Zakai Ziegler over at Tennessee. And you just go down the list of these guys that are trying to petition the NCAA for another year, and I understand that you want to be able to make money being able to play college basketball. I understand that we want great talent in college basketball, but at some point, enough is enough, and it's nice to see the NCAA finally winning one or two of these court rulings.
Yeah, there needs to be some term limits in college basketball, right? I mean, it's great that these players can make money and make a living and even just establish themselves for, decades upon decades while playing college basketball if they handle their money correctly. But at the same time, this is still college sports. It's supposed to be an amateuristic league, quote unquote, but the reality is this is kind of like the minor leagues for Major League Baseball or the minor leagues for the NBA or minor leagues for, like the overseas opportunities that are going to arise. And I'm sure Zakai Ziegler would rather make money playing for Tennessee rather than trying to cut it on a summer league roster or on a G League roster, not really knowing where he's going to live or where he's going to be bouncing around at, and probably honestly making less money as a professional basketball player than he would in college. But again, we have to cap some of these guys. You can't be 30 years old playing the sport, even though Chad Baker-Mazara is definitely pushing those limits.
I still remember Brandon Whedon way back in the day, but at the very least, he didn't use up his eligibility to start with as well, so there's that aspect of things. I still have 2 years of college bowling experience I could utilize as well, and it did warm my heart when I saw J.R. Smith playing golf as well over at North Carolina A&T. Unfortunately, his golf skills were probably just as good as him looking the wrong way at the basket during the NBA Finals, but you know what? That's what you do like to see, but I do think that it's good that we've been able to see that, but I do think that it also does lead to a little bit of intrigue with regards to some of these teams that maybe missed out in the transfer portal, because I talked about with Kansas. It feels like they really whiffed in the transfer portal. It feels like they just have had a rough offseason in general, and I want to talk about that a little bit more on the flip side with Rob, because we always talk about the winners of the college basketball offseason, these teams that they do a nice job of leveling up. Let's talk about some of these teams that have been a little bit rough, and then we'll get Rob's thoughts on a few mid-majors that he's liking for the upcoming season as well. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man and Rob Donaldson. Does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB. YouTube.com/Rob Donaldson is where you're able to catch all of his videos. And we're talking about it on the flip side, talking about some of these teams that have whiffed in the transfer portal, and Kansas has very clearly been one of those teams. Are there a few other programs that you're just underwhelmed by their offseason and you feel like they might just struggle this year in general, because we always want to, this time of year, look at the winners, the teams that might be able to rise up. Not a lot of people want to look at the disappointments, and I think that that's very worth bringing up, because along with teams that you're able to bet towards the beginning part of the season, teams that you're able to fade towards the beginning part of the season could be the most profitable of them all.
And one of them, and this is going to hurt my soul, because I love this head coach, and I love sort of the player loyalty that he's had at two different stops, but I look at a guy like a Mike Rhodes at Penn State, and I think he unfortunately just took the wrong job at the wrong time, where Penn State's not really investing a lot into their basketball program. It was almost up to Mike Rhodes to build or resurrect a dead program from the ground up. And
were they ever alive?
Yeah, but were they ever alive? I mean, they had a one little kind of blip in their run, and that was kind of the whole thing of it, where they made the round of 32. But outside of that, this is a program with zero basketball history for the most part, and they were already sitting at the bottom of the Big Ten. And now it just kind of feels like, all right, he doesn't have Ace Baldwin. Who are these guys going to be stepping in? And it really feels like they just lost a bunch of players. I'm not even sure if they have 13 players to their roster as we speak. That's just kind of unfortunate, because Mike Rose is a great coach. He passed up a really great gig at VCU that obviously led on, to a different head coach in Ryan Odom, getting a Virginia job, a basketball program that does invest in their program. And I think he saw the high major opportunity. He was coming off a 27-win season, and everything looked great. And now I just kind of feel like we're about to see a little bit of a flat line at this point in Mike Rhodes' career, which is a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And the fact that they lost out on Yannick Koenig-Niederhauser, they were one of the very few losers of the NBA draft decisions. And of course, it was Penn State that lost out on that as well. That I thought was just absolutely gutting for them as well. And it does feel like one of those teams that they're sort of stuck in the mud in terms of some of these conferences as well. And how do you take a look at some of these other teams as well? Like, I think that South Carolina, who they had to come up 2 seasons ago, they're in an interesting case where in the SEC, they're just a team that's towards the bottom of the conference in general, whereas in any other conference, they'd be rock solid. I even take a look at a team like Minnesota. I do think that Minnesota is going to have a come up this year, but again, I feel like with Minnesota, it's just a case where there's just so much talent around them, and it's going to take Nico Medved a few years for them to be able to get online, albeit I think that they're going to be much, much better this year because now they've got an actual coach, but I do think that there are some of these programs that they're just a victim of, shall we say, unfortunate circumstance where they're pretty rock solid, but there's just so much talent around them in these big power conferences in this day and age that you get drowned out.
I really do feel like the worst for like the guys like a Steve Peichel, or even more so like a Chris Collins, guys who stayed in one spot or in one region throughout this long stretch and have truly actually resurrected their programs respectably to, consistent tournament appearances. And then all of a sudden it kind of got cut in half because the entire landscape of talent acquisition, how you acquired, good players, completely flipped on its head, and it's left, these programs like a Rutgers with high academic standards, or Northwestern with higher academic standards and not a lot of NIL backing to sort of kind of calibrate on how they're going to acquire this talent. And they've just been left behind. And obviously, the NCAA isn't losing sleep over, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Stanford, and all these other schools. They're just like, yeah, okay, we hear you. Have a good one. And now it's just like, what do they do? I don't know if they can really do anything. And eventually, I think we're going to end up seeing kind of these programs almost fall off an entire cliff, where eventually Steve Peichel, Chris Collins, a lot of these coaches that have stuck it out with one brand, with one university, are going to jump ship to the next opportunity at a major prominent university actually investing in their schools. And that's unfortunate when you're talking about, I guess, these brand loyal guys that really aren't being rewarded for it on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, it is really unfortunate to see. And I do think that it just comes a point where some of these schools need to adapt. Like, I am someone that I thought Greg Gard was stuck in his ways for a very long time. Seeing Wisconsin going out there, getting a few guys in the transfer portal, having John Tanji be what he was, and them not playing as slow as molasses last year, I thought was massive for them. And how many programs do you think should be taking that Wisconsin model, looking themselves in the mirror and realizing, oh, this is not 1980 anymore. This is now 2025/26. We need to get with the times, and we need to make a few adjustments, much like Wisconsin did, to their credit, started last season.
I think Michigan State has to be the one, and whether that's with Izzo or without Izzo, I think the model of, he was so blindsided when Holloman transferred out of the program because the day prior he released a statement to the media saying, this is one of my favorite group of guys, everybody is loyal to one another, we're here to build something, and then Holloman enters the portal and now he's gone, and it's just like, Tom, I get it, man, like you built up these guys, you gave them a platform to really excel, and heck, you made, an Elite Eight with them just this past season and actually competed really well throughout the entire Big Ten slate. But I just feel like Michigan State is one of those programs that's almost in the purgatory zone of they're not doing enough to acquire enough talent. They're just relying on the program building up the talent just like they've always done. And again, that is very anti, of how college basketball is played nowadays. And I think even, you look at an Oregon or you look at a Butler, for example, some of these coaches that have really grown up in a number of different eras, it's just flipping on their head. And those would be the programs I would 100% identify as kind of needing to, quote unquote, get with the times.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I think that those are going to be teams that are going to be very interesting to look at this season, as we do have our good friend Rob Donaldson of the Rob's Best Bets show joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how about if we flip it a little bit more, because we've talked about these power programs that they might be good, they might be bad this season. Who are a few mid-majors that you take a look at and you're excited to see what they're able to do this season, and maybe you just feel really good about the offseason that they've had? Because I remember the last time you were on, you were giving a little bit of love to the OVC, Southern Indiana, and I am right there with you. I think that they're in for a big season. Are there a few other ones that stand out to you where you're thinking that it might be a big year for them?
Well, I look at the CAA, and this is a conference that I think over the past decade has really shown its teeth in terms of, tournament success, how they compete in the first round or even beyond the first round, and also the coaches that kind of go from the mid-major leagues that are a little bit smaller and then up a class. And the CAA typically is a landing spot. And last year, one of the teams that we saw almost surprisingly emerge almost quote-unquote out of nowhere was William and Mary. And the interesting thing about William and Mary, that at least that I found interesting, is they kind of adopted the Cornell model of, hey, we're going to free up our guards, we're going to run that high-paced offense, and that typically does play well in the CAA. And right now, William and Mary, in year two, I do feel like this is a really nice rebuilding opportunity, and I think there was a huge step in year one, tapered off near the end after they had some injuries, unfortunately, throughout the process of the regular season. But that's a team that I immediately identify as a team that has that continuity, has some talent coming in, and a good coach that I think could actually get them over the hump, maybe into that top 2 zone in the CAA.
Oh, one of my favorite schools right there, because you don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both. America's favorite tag team right there, and one of the 3 original schools in college basketball still remaining, because St. Francis of New York / Brooklyn is no longer at the Division I level, and they got rid of all sports in general, that has not made the NCAA tournament. The other 2 being also Army along with the Citadel. So they're looking for their first ever trip to the NCAA tournament among the original NCAA schools. Hopefully they get there, and we're always getting great insights when you're aboard, my friend. Rob, you do such an incredible job taking a look at this sport that we all know and love of college basketball. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking hoops with you. And for those who want to follow my Major League Baseball bets or even my college basketball bets once that season comes into fold, you can do so on Twitter /X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Always great to be able to get Rob aboard. He does such an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and every single time he joins me on such great insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, name does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. Big thanks once again, Rob, for joining me on the show today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.